Greetings, everyone. We were running a few minutes late because of technical difficulties on my end. So I am here today with Armando Alvarez, who is another person who, like me, I was just recently in the success stories for Forks Over Knives, and Armando was as well. And he has a pretty fantastic story to tell. So without ruining too much of it, because I want him to tell it, I'm going to bring him into our chat. So welcome, Armando.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's good to be here with you.
You as well. So what I just want to do before we get started is just remind everyone listening that neither Armando or ourselves are medical professionals. So everything you hear is stuff we've done on our own, research we've done on our own. If you're looking to go on any kind of a health journey for yourself, please do your due diligence. Talk to your doctors or nutritionists or whoever you work with. You know, don't take everything we say as gospel. Do your own research. Be safe and be careful.
Yes, absolutely.
So thanks for joining us, and anyone listening, watching in, feel free to throw us any questions you have throughout, and we'll be happy to get around to them. Otherwise, Armando, why don't you start by just kind of telling us your story?
Okay. Basically the story. I'm 63 years old, so I guess I'll start with my age. So I have a lot of years, that has built up in my story. But I was very athletic growing up. I played collegiate football. I was a wide receiver, running countless miles. So I could never gain weight. I remember I actually wanted to gain weight because of my position and so on and so forth. But I couldn't gain any weight. After I quit football, I immediately just ballooned. I mean, I gained tons of weight. And obviously I thought, okay, well, it's because I'm not doing as much workout. So it's just I need to get back out there and run some more and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, it wasn't as simple as that, because the eating was such a big part of what was contributing to the weight gain and the unhealthy position and the trajectory that I was moving in. I didn't even understand that, because still back then, if I would start running, I could easily lose 5 to 10 pounds in a week. So it was kind of like this balancing act. There's a saying that I'm sure you're familiar with. It's called, "You can't outrun your fork." And, I had never heard that back then, but it became true that no matter how much I was exercising at a certain age, it just kept going, it was like a snowball effect. It just kept going the wrong way. So eventually I became, I was like 245 pounds, which I read your story, which is just unbelievable. You were like 335 or something like that.
I think I was 360 at my heaviest.
360. My goodness. That's unbelievable. And how you were able to lose all your weight and get healthy. And there's a price to pay. I mean, you were doing intermittent fasting and there's a price in this journey. It's not a free journey.
Right.
Everybody kind of wants the quick fix or whatever, but there's a price. But anyway, in my 40s, I was up to 245. I'm 5'8", so I was pretty big, and I was diagnosed with diabetes in my mid 40s. So I remember immediately from day one, I took it seriously. I went to whatever classes they were offering at the hospital for diabetes. I took it as seriously as I could, and I really tried to understand it. Fortunately for me, I was able to maintain the control for most part with just oral meds, metformin. Pretty much, it was just metformin.
What is that for those that don't know?
Metformin is a diabetes medicine that helps your body regulate the blood sugars. Diabetes is called, I had type 2 diabetes, which means that my pancreas was creating insulin, but my body was not using it correctly. So that's type 2 diabetes. A lot of people, once they're diagnosed, are with type 2, almost immediately go on insulin. I mean, sometimes within months. So now they're on insulin, which is a whole nother thing that they have to deal with, as far as they can gain weight because of the insulin, and there's just a lot of other things that happen. So fortunately, in my situation, I never had to go to that. However, because of the weight, one of my doctors wanted to put me on a keto diet, which is high fat, low carbs, and it gives you amazing biomarker numbers. So my A1C was phenomenal. Everything looked good on paper. So whenever I went in there, that looked good. But unfortunately, one of the things that the kind of unintended consequence of the keto was I ended up with blockages in my heart arteries. And
do you know why how keto contributed to that particularly?
I'm not really sure, but I know that every cardiologist I've ever spoken to, they almost laugh when they hear about keto because they get so many patients. My understanding and kind of my breakdown of what I thought happened was that it takes 3 days to get into ketosis, which is when you're burning the fat, but you have to be like under 20 grams of carbs in order to hit ketosis. So what I always looked at was I never really did keto perfectly. And I think a lot of people that do keto don't do it perfectly. So most of the time you're not in ketosis, you're kind of in that twilight area. So your body is not really burning the fat. It's starting to store the fat is what I think is happening. Because I was always messing it up. I remember one time I had a mint and I looked and I noticed that the carbs on the mint were like 4 or 5. And I was like, I just used up 25% of my carbs on that mint, And so I don't know what caused it, but I started having chest pain. The chest pain, I was on holiday with my wife. We were in Key West, and we were going out for a run. And being a former athlete, whenever I have a hiccup, as far as feeling anything, I'm always thinking, I'm just out of shape. I mean, that's like my go-to thought, right? I'm sure you can relate with that. Just get back in shape. I just am out of shape. So this particular time, I'm starting to have chest pain, and I'm thinking, I'm just a little winded, blah, blah, blah. Baby, just give me a minute. She gave me a little bit of time. I was like, okay, I'm fine. We just continued, right? 3 months later, right before my son's wedding, I was sitting, we just had the rehearsal dinner, and I'm just kind of sitting there on the couch, and I just am feeling massive chest pain, and I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack. And actually, it was confirmed later on through an EKG that I did, in fact, have a heart attack. But I remember praying. I said, Lord, I cannot have a heart attack right now. It's going to mess up my son's wedding.
And how old were you when this happened?
I was 58.
Okay.
I was 58. So fast forward, the pain went away, subsided. Fast forward, I was still having massive chest pain. They do an angiogram. They find out that I have 100% blockage in one artery on the right descending artery. I think that's what they call it. I had 2 others, 80%. I had 70% on my left, the widowmaker. And the doctor comes in, and ironically, what he says to me, the cardiologist comes in and he says, too much rice and beans, which, as we know, that was, 180 of what it actually was. That had nothing to do with my condition. It wasn't rice and beans. But he kind of, I guess, was trying to just make light of it. And he was like, you need to have triple bypass heart surgery and so on and so forth. Now, in my situation, I had bad experiences with anesthesia. So that terrified me to hear that, I was going to have to go through something like this. So the next day I was calling the cardiologist because I wanted to see, look, I knew that my heart was strong because he told me that my heart was getting all the blood it needed. So I knew that somehow my heart was getting blood, even though it had 100% blockage. So I was calling his office because I wanted to see, is there any way that we could possibly do stents on the 80%, but leave the 100% one alone? But he never returned my call. He wouldn't call me back. His nurse kept calling me back, apologizing, saying that he's had a hard day and a long day and all this kind of stuff. And actually was begging me, crying on the phone for me to have the open heart surgery. Now, what happened, what happened was by that time, I was already researching a lot of things. I came across a study by the Mayo Clinic that said that even if you have the procedure, it doesn't extend your life, not one day from doing it through lifestyle and possibly some meds. So I started reading that and I started realizing that, you know what, I need to make a decision. I mean, Am I going to go through the stents and the procedure, or am I going to look at another option? My concern with the stent was that for the rest of my life, I would be on blood thinners in order to keep the stent open. So that was kind of one of my concerns there. But I also, again, went back to the fact that I knew my heart was good. My ejection fraction was good. My, the blood was somehow getting there. So I started researching that. And I found out that we have, maybe not everybody, but I had collaterals. Are you familiar with collaterals?
No.
Collaterals are like a detour. Like if you're on the interstate and all of a sudden there's an accident and there's, blockage, collision or whatever, and you can't continue, and they open up detours to get people off, those are collaterals. They are different pathways to get you through the blockage that goes back into the heart. So I had collaterals. And so because of that, I was like, okay, my heart is strong. I mean, I'm getting blood. Although I was also having angina, which is almost like a heart attack kind of.
Yeah, my father went through that.
Okay, so I was having angina and I was having it almost every day. But I decided I'm not going to do the procedures. I'm going to move towards strengthening my collaterals and so on and so forth. So my wife and I found out about, Dr. Esselstyn and, Dr. Ornish, and I read those books. And
guys, it's funny how once you find one of them, it just becomes
a
goal where you're like, and then you find Furman, and then you find Esselstyn's and all those other people. It just becomes this nonstop.
Yes. What was interesting was, and I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit, I would constantly research. I mean, I was always looking for little nuggets. And I would hear a lot of the same information, like 98, 99% of it was just kind of the same information that I would read and hear. But I came across this one interview with Dr. McDougall, and he had another doctor on there, Hans Deal. I had never heard of Hans Deal up to this point.
I don't think I've heard of him either.
Now. Hans Deal, this is just incredible. He started a CHIP program 30 years ago. And I think it was called Complete Cardiovascular Health and Fitness. I mean, but it was having to do with heart disease. So it was along the lines of Ornish and Esselstyn. It was Hans Deal. So he had a program called, it was called CHIP. Okay. And it was done by Advent Health, which is the hospital chain in Florida. So I'm like, wow, I'd never heard of this before. And I'm like, because I was looking up Dr. Ornish's program, and I think it was like $8,000, $15,000 for this immersive week out in San Francisco. I mean, it was going to cost forever, a lot of money to go there, and I couldn't afford it. So all of a sudden, this was more affordable. I was like, oh, wait, this is like $800 or something like this. So I make this phone call, and this Dina Guthrie picks up, right? She's a nurse, and she's been running these CHIP programs. She's worked with Hans Deal for years. So she not only did I hear about Hans Deal through that, video, but here is this kind of his associate, So anyway, she tells me about a program called Diabetes Undone. She says it's not quite CHIP because we haven't done CHIP in years, but this is the program. And she goes into detail. It's Whole Foods plant-based program, right? And she says, we think you're going to like it. Long story short, when I met her, that after I told her my situation on the phone, but when I met her, she looked at me knowing that I had the angina, knowing all these things. And she thought, this guy's going to drop dead right in front of me. I mean, she just thought I was going to have a heart attack. So she was very concerned, about me. I end up doing the Diabetes Undone twice. They end up bringing back the CHIP program. They did that twice. I went through that program. So it's like you said, it's amazing how everything kind of ties together, and you all of a sudden you start learning about this. But now I'm just going to backtrack, a little bit. So what happened was when I first started learning about this, and I think this is a tendency that a lot of us have, we don't really want to change. We don't like the pain. We don't like the discomfort of being maybe overweight or maybe being unhealthy. We don't like that part of it, but we love our food. We love the burgers and we love the fries and we love the pizza and all this. So we have this choice that we have to make. It's like, okay, I really, really like my food, but I really, really dislike this, this place that I,
I don't like what my food does to me.
Yeah. I love my food, but I don't know.
It's literally an abusive relationship, right?
It really is. I mean, if you look at it, it really is. So what do we decide to do? Here I know that I have 100% blockage. What do I decide to do? I look at my wife, I said, guess what? We're going to be vegetarian. We're going to be vegetarian. So here we are thinking, we're vegetarian and so on and so forth, and we're moving in the right direction. So meanwhile, we're still doing the same things. We're going out to restaurants, we're having pizza and all of this, but now we're just not doing the meat part of it. I'm still having angina every day. I mean, that's still there.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that I'm moving in the right direction. So fast forward, I find out about this doctor, which also is kind of related to Dr. Osfeld, Robert Osfeld, who was also in Forks Over Knives a few years ago. They call him Dr. Kale. I find out about him. He's in the Bronx. And I reach out and I said, I want you to be my cardiologist. So he always says that, the patient is always right. And he's very, much an advocate for the patient and everything. So I finally get to see him. I give him my blood work and he looks a little bit, he looks a little nervous. And I thought he was going to pat me on the back and say, man, you're doing great. Wow, you're doing awesome. Instead, he looks at me, he goes, you're at a very high risk for a cardiac event within the next 90 days, either a heart attack or a stroke.
Wow.
And what I didn't realize was my cardiac ratio was like 8.5. You want to be under 5, preferably 2 something. And here I was at 8.5. So for the first time, I heard whole foods, plant-based, no oils. That's the first time I heard it. I'm sure I read about it in Esselstein's book, and I'm sure they were saying it, but for some reason, it wasn't clicking.
Yeah.
But now it clicked. Whole foods, plant-based, no oils. So he put me on some meds, and I just made it my mission to eat my greens and to chew my greens and to start building up the nitric oxide in my blood and to try to stabilize my arteries and everything. And so that was right before I met Dina with the Diabetes Undone. So that was the next thing. So now I'm going to these classes. I'm still kind of just devouring all of this information and tweaking and just, continuing to try to get better. So I meet Dina's husband, Dr. George Guthrie. Now, all I know is he's a physician, and all I know is he's Dina's husband. I had no idea that he was one of the founding members of the lifestyle of college medicine. And I apologize, I'm mispronouncing it. It's this preventive medicine group that's basically plant-based. And he was one of the founders of this College of Lifestyle Medicine.
Okay.
He was the president of this. He's my doctor, right? So now I'm seeing Dr.
You're in good hands at this point.
Man, I'm in great hands. I have Dr. Osfeld in New York and Dr. Guthrie here. And Dr. Guthrie is funny. I mean, because he was the perfect doctor for me because we were really in sync. I remember one time, as I'm kind of progressing in my healing, I said to him, have you ever heard of anybody that had 100% occlusion, reverse that? And he laughs. He goes, I don't know. Maybe you'll be the first one. And I don't know, but I like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I like that. I like that kind of living on the edge, kind of like, yeah, why not be a pioneer? Why not be a trailblazer in this?
Well, it's also that mentality of just like, there's so many doctors that I always, and this isn't to diss doctors, but I always think of like doctors like as mechanics. Like they're there to like fix the problems after they come in, as opposed to be preventative, right?
Yes.
Where I know another Canadian filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker in my other part of my life, named Sarah Pauly, went through concussion. And so for the longest time, all the doctors she met with told her, it's like, she'd ask me, like, do you think I'll ever be able to make a film again? Because it's just hard for her to concentrate. Lots of noises and bright lights, triggered her concussion symptoms. And for the longest time, all the doctors would tell her, it's like, well, it's a nice goal to have, but, probably not. until she met this one, and they told her, you won't be fully healed until you make a film, because that's the kind of thing, and that just gave her that and it's just that open mindset.
Yes. It's so interesting that you make that statement about your friend. When I was in the waiting room and the doctor came in, both my wife and I are Christians, and I always have this default scripture, from the Bible that pops up, and it says, I will not fear evil tidings, for my heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. I mean, whenever there's a calamity that comes on me, that just pops up, right? And sure enough, it popped up, when the doctor's telling me that you have all these blockages and all this. But there was another one that popped up, which is a very common verse that people that even are not Christian know this verse. But it was so interesting because it's not one that normally pops up. And it was this. It says, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And what really, I guess, touched me about that was the tense. It wasn't you were, you are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that little shift of the tense, of that perspective, gave me the sense that from this moment forward, I was becoming a new person. That it wasn't just what I was in my past that led me to this point, but that I had an opportunity to shift into something new. And that's exactly what happened with Dr. Guthrie. And this was just so amazing, and it was such a gift from him, because I really thought that my athletic days were behind me. I mean, I thought, my goodness, at 13 years by that time, diabetes, heart disease. I mean, one doctor was telling me, don't move, don't breathe, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, he's like all of this fear. And Dr. Guthrie comes along, and this was like 3-4 months after, Dr. Oswald said, you're at high risk. Dr. Guthrie starts telling me, you can start exercising now. I'm like, exercising? And he goes, yeah. He goes, this is how you do it. You get a heart rate monitor, and he uses Polar. So I'm doing an ad for Polar. So I got what he got, Polar. Yeah. And supposedly they have the best, most efficient heart rate, and so on and so forth. And he said, this is how you do it. You get to a certain heart rate. This is your max. And then you come it down, and then, so on and so forth. So here I am, with this green light that I can start being an athlete again, which is so important, because when we get into that situation where we are sick, it's easy for us to think of ourselves as a diseased individual. I am a diabetic. I have heart disease. I have, whatever it is. And we become that. We become that disease. And it becomes kind of an extension of who we are as a person. But it wasn't happening that way, because now he added in athlete into that mix. So here I am, still with angina. I still had angina almost every day. But I'm starting to work out. I start doing exercise. I start doing races.
So how did you start that process of moving? Would you just start going like fast-paced walks and then work yourself up to it?
Yes. Actually, early on, it was primarily I was running. I was like, I am going to run a mile. I am going to run. And I got up to 6 miles that I could run. And but it was just, a lot of it was just grit and so on and so forth. Another thing Dr. Guthrie was doing was he was starting to wean me off of the meds. And at one point, I was off all the meds, all the diabetes meds, everything. I was off the statin, everything. So.
And how long was that process from when you started with him that you were able to suddenly stop using the meds?
Well, it was a weaning off on the meds. It wasn't all at once. He took me. He lowered the dose on some, and then it gradually. But it was probably 6 months. So if we look at the time when I was in New York with my cardiologist, which was January, it was probably around October that I was off of the meds. And he always gave me the option. It wasn't like he was saying, I'm going to take you off. But I had the feeling that my body, should be in the most natural state in order to heal itself. And that was kind of my thinking. So this was kind of an interesting story because now I'm starting to do 5Ks. My first 5K, if you know anything about times that people run in 5Ks, I mean, they run their athletes run them in 5-minute miles, and so they're done in 15 minutes. But my first 5K was like 18.5-minute miles, right? And there was some walking and running in this. When I told my cardiologist about that, he looked at me, he says, with your condition, your heart condition, he says, you were sprinting.
Yeah.
At 18-minute miles. So that's encouraging. That was kind of a neat thing. But so what happened was my wife and I are doing 2 races a month. We're doing 2 5K races a month.
Wow.
And I'm still having angina. I'm still, doing angina. But I'm like, okay, I'm building my collaterals. And so on. So I entered this race. And this is, I want to be really careful when I say this because this was stupid what I did. I mean, it was really, really stupid. The race was kind of far away from where we live, so it was like a 2-hour drive to get there. It cost X number of dollars to get into the race. But I'm having really bad chest pain. So I'm like, I think I'm going to pull out of this race. I'm not going to do this race, right? This 5K. But then I was like, man, but we just paid X number of dollars and we just drove 2 hours. And so I take a nitroglycerin pill, okay? And I take a baby aspirin, because I'm still going to do this race. Okay. Now, I promised myself that I would be very vigilant and kind of monitor my body, which I always have tried to do. I always really try. And if I had felt something during the race, I would have stopped.
Good.
Okay. I would have stopped. But I entered the race. But I'm so glad I didn't because of this. I'm doing this race and I'm struggling. I'm doing run walk. I'm struggling. And there's this lady, and God bless her. I don't know anything about this person. I don't know her situation, right? But she looked like she was at least 81 years old. And she was like kicking my butt. And she's like shuffling. She's shuffling. She's not even like trying to walk. And she's shuffling. Yeah. And I'm like, and so I finally passed her and I took a selfie and you can see her, in the background. And I said, I put it on Facebook. I said, I finally passed her, but it wasn't easy, right? So right around that time, that was October 18th, right around that time, Dr. Guthrie sent me a text with like 5 words, and I think it's 5 words. Cheese is hard on your arteries, 6 words. And October 31st, I gave up cheese. Well, wow. Here's the crazy thing. From October, struggling in this race, to January, so 2.5 months, I did my first half marathon, 13.1 miles. So I went from struggling to being able to do a half marathon because basically I gave up cheese, which was the final thing that I had to do.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning the whole idea of like the weaning ourselves off of that old way of eating. I called it my farewell tour, and it's
yeah, that's good. I like that.
Like by the time I finally went off it, it was about. I realized it probably took me about 6 months to a year to finally cut it all out. And when I did finally cut it all out, I hadn't even realized it right away. I just kind of eventually stopped. And then someone at this company I was working at brought out these gorgeous cookies that were just like, I think each cookie had like a half a pound of butter in it.
Yes.
And I hadn't even thought of myself as like completely whole placed or whole food, plant-based or vegan at that point. That's how I ate. And so I took a bite of this thing. I'm like, of course, it's, delicious and rich and fatty. Within an hour, I was throwing it up because my body suddenly was no longer using that fat and that oil, and it rejected it. And I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And
Isn't that amazing?
And I find the same way if someone sneaks like an animal broth into a soup or something, I might not be able to taste it right away, but my body will let me know.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. One of the things that that there was kind of an interesting enlightenment kind of a thing was I would always look at myself when I was heavy and I would say to myself, well, I'm unhealthy because I'm heavy. I need to lose weight to become healthy. And I struggle with that. I just could never seem to lose weight, but I was always trying to lose weight. But I realized at one point that I had it wrong. I wasn't unhealthy because I was fat. I was heavy because I was unhealthy. So I needed to not focus on the weight. I needed to focus on my health. And that, and as I
Isn't it
focus,
funny? Well, and we also like equate. Well, I just need to move more. It's like nobody ever wants to change the way they eat.
yeah, they don't.
But
It's
yeah, I mean, for me, it was like I looked at it as like I needed to change three things. I needed to change the way I moved, the way I ate, but the most important thing that I think you got to a couple points in this conversation is I need to change the way I think. And
yes,
until
yes.
you do that, those other two things aren't possible.
That's correct. That's correct. You're the thing that I have much respect for you is you're at 360 pounds. That could be so overwhelming. I mean, when you start losing weight, it's like, oh, I lost 10 pounds. Okay, well, that means I'm at 350. You know what I mean? It could be this feeling of just this is never going to end.
Yeah.
That's just remarkable what you were able to do.
But for me, it was like it became almost a game in a way where it was like because I was losing 8 to 10 pounds a month once I started. So I was like, oh my, how far can I take this?
Yeah.
I had a little chart I was keeping. I was like, for me, it wasn't the dauntingness of like, oh, I've got so much to lose still. It was just like, how far can I take this thing? Because it didn't feel, once I had that mental switch, it didn't feel like a hard effort because I was enjoying the food.
Yes.
I was seeing results.
Yes.
And I was really lucky. Like I started in my mid 30s to get my around it. And I wasn't having any heart problems. I wasn't having a doctor pounding on my door. I just was just looking at myself going, this is bad. Like you're not, it's not going to, and I knew because my dad had health problems and he was a big guy. And I just went, my future is not good if I don't make a change now.
Excellent.
And I was still young enough. And I'm like, I think if I don't do it now, I never will. And so I kind of made this, I just told myself, I'm like, for the next 6 months, you're going to eat this way. You're going to move a certain amount a day. And if nothing changes and you're still the slob you've been, then that's who you're going to be.
Yeah.
So within 6 months, I had lost, I don't know, 75 pounds in the first 6 months.
That's amazing. You said something that I wholeheartedly agree. You said that it became a game.
Yeah.
I'm very much into games and I make everything a game. I use my notes. I don't have my phone with me here, but I use my notes and I use emojis. Okay. One of the things I started doing as I was moving into this new way of eating was I needed to establish new habits. One of them was eating my greens. So I would give myself, I had a list of what I needed to do. And a lot of times when people diet, it's what they're not going to do. I'm not going to have sugar. I'm not going to eat cookies. I'm not going to, what they're not going to do. And what I found, and maybe what you found as well, was it wasn't what you're not going to do. It's what are you doing?
The positive.
Yeah, it's a positive. It's a new thing. What are you doing? Because the bottom line is, if you're doing more positive things rather than negative things, your body, regardless of the negative things, I mean, I'm speaking generally. I mean, there's some negative things that we can do that are, drastic and everything. But overall, the more positive that we're doing, we're going to move in the positive direction, all things being equal. So that's what I focus on. So I focus on my greens. I used to have this elixir of beet juice with, I think I even put garlic in there and turmeric. And I mean, I had to drink that every morning, okay, because that was opening up my arteries, that kind of a thing. So what I would do is I would give myself these emojis at the end of the day, like a heart emoji, right? That I did that. Or I even did another one when it came to the exercise because of the football. I gave myself a football at the end of the thing. So here's my whole thing. So at the end of the week, if I had 5 footballs, right? 5 footballs, I gave myself a golden football. It's probably like a rugby football emoji. But I gave myself this rugby golden football. If I had 4 of those rugbies, which basically meant that I did the whole month pretty much 80%, 90% on point, I allowed myself to go to this spot in Orlando that was very significant to me because it was a time in my life that I felt most in shape. And I used to do like 7-mile runs in this area. So I had to earn that to get back to that spot. And I had to earn that by doing all of these right things. So it became a game. And I still
You made a sticker chart for yourself.
I made a sticker chart. Remember in kindergarten, you get the star and the.
My kids are. I still we use a sticker chart for my daughter still.
Yeah, man, I use that, and I try to put as much, feeling and all this. Last year, I started adding weights. So most people, what they do in January is they go to the gym, and then by February 1st, they're out of the gym. Their resolutions are out the window. So I didn't want to do that. So what I did was last year in December, I had this, this plan, this whole goal thing. And I said to myself, okay, I want to earn the right to go to a gym. So how do I earn the right to go to a gym? I need to get familiar with lifting weights, so on and so forth. So I had to lift weights at home for 90 days. And I would do the, little emojis, I added all the emojis. And when I had my 90 days, I was ready for the next thing. Well, the next thing I did was I reached out to this friend of mine. His name is Nicholas Ryan, that I've known since he was basically a baby. Guy looks like Tarzan. I mean, he is in incredible shape. Matter of fact, today's his birthday. Incredible shape.
Happy birthday, Ryan.
Yeah. And I said, I need your help. I need you to be my accountability partner. So I brought him into this this world of the sticker, the emojis. So what I would do is every week that I worked out, I had to go X number of times and do certain exercises. So I would give him my report, and he would give me this tiger emoji, right? So I started with a baby tiger. I had a baby tiger emoji. So every week he would give me some encouraging words, little baby tiger emoji, right? So I did 3-4 months of that. And I progressed to a regular tiger emoji. Now, my goal was to continue that until December. And then I wanted to join a gym that had a pool because I've been wanting to do a triathlon. I've done 6 half marathons, but I wanted to do a triathlon. But I'm not there yet. I'm not. Yeah. It's not there. I'm not going to rule it out, but right now I don't see it happening. Maybe in a year or 2 years. But anyway, so what happened was instead of doing the gym with that, my wife starts joining me with the weights. So we go twice a week. We walk to the gym. It's about 3.5 miles, or 4 miles, the whole thing. So now I get 2 tiger emojis and they're like real tigers. They're photos of 2 tigers. And I use it. And when we're there, the exercises, I give myself a heart and a little exercise weightlifter guy as my emoji, and I track it. I have my workouts, and it just keeps me on point. So it's a game.
It's so nice to have that support too. That you've got that friend. Like I didn't really have a workout buddy or anything like that. The closest thing I had, there was this other guy. I called him Fit Santa Claus.
Okay,
and he was this like guy that was
I think is that on Instagram?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I gave him in my head.
Yeah.
Could be a real guy. But he just had this beard, but he looked like he was just built.
Yes.
And we both worked out first thing in the morning at this gym. We never talked to each other. Like
it
was just like, you're there, I'm here, but we were usually the only people there, but we were there the same day. And I remember him coming up to me like 6 months in. He just walked over me one day and I was like, oh shit. Like I screwed something up. He's mad at me. And he's like, I've been watching you for the last 6 months. Like you do not look like the same person.
Wow.
Like, it's incredible. And just like he was so kind and sweet. That meant so much. And it was like, it was such, and I should anyone listening just know that it's like the smallest thing you can say to someone on that journey, it means so much.
Yes. And, well, I'm going to go the opposite side now because this was kind of unexpected, but it ended up being a positive. I was working back at this resort. I was in sales. And this is when I was getting into the groove of my habit. So what I would do is I would go to the grocery store and I would get this gigantic green salad, with all the different romaine and so on and so forth. And I just forced myself to eat this, and chew and to eat this. Now I was doing it wrong because I really should be doing that throughout the day, not just in one meal, but I didn't know. So I'm sitting in the break room and I'm eating my greens. And this is 3 months after I saw my cardiologist who was telling me you're at a high risk. I mean, so not a lot of changes had happened yet.
Yeah.
And he looks at me, he goes, I see you eating so healthy, blah, blah, blah. He goes, why do you still have a belly? Why do you still have a belly? Now, the irony is that
It
this
took me
particular,
decades to do this.
yeah. I mean, like, you see,
I've been eating healthy for 30 days.
exactly. But you know what's interesting about this particular person is he did the gastric bypass. I mean, I would see this guy lose, it seemed like 20 pounds in a week and gain 30 pounds in a week and lose 20. I mean, it was just like unbelievable how fast I would see this guy fluctuate.
Yeah.
So when he said that to me, I was writing it down. He goes, "What are you doing? You know, why are you writing that down?" And I looked at him and said, "Because I'm using this as fuel. I'm using this as fuel." You know, and because my thinking was different. What he didn't understand was weight loss was not my goal. My goal was to heal my arteries and to get healthy from the inside out. That was my goal, not the weight loss. But I just thought that was interesting because it was a negative thing that was said to me that years ago that would have derailed me. If that had happened 10 years prior, that would have derailed me because I was always looking for some kind of confirmation from the outside. I wanted people to, "Oh, wow, you lost some weight. Oh, you're looking at whatever." I was way past that. You know, I was way past that.
You know what it is? It's just, I find, and I still get, I just kind of smile and nod and let it go. Where you just get some people that just, they're threatened by the knowing how hard we have worked to do what we've done.
I think so. Yes.
Like you said, it's not easy. And so it's easier to just dismiss it or to like make comments about it and try to like bring us down a peg rather than acknowledge, "Oh, you did something really hard and I probably don't have that in me."
Oh my gosh, that's very hard to, to do. You would have to be really self-aware to realize you're even doing that.
I saw another quote in another YouTube video where someone says, "No one gives a shit about what you eat until you start eating healthy."
Absolutely, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everyone has an opinion about it.
It's ironic, but you're right. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because one of the things that I realized about food, and that quote, "You can't outrun your fork," there's a lot to that. Not only between the ratio of physical activity and food, that it goes beyond that. That fork represents our upbringing. That fork represents our culture. That fork represents our social setting. So that fork is a very powerful thing because all of a sudden you start shifting the way that you eat and not eating certain things that maybe you were brought up with. And there are people that feel offended. It's like, wait a second. You didn't touch grandma's pot roast.
Yeah.
That's been in our family for 80 years. How come you didn't take, not even a little bit? Why didn't you take that? So now you just insulted grandma and she's been dead for 40 years, but you just insulted grandma because her recipe that's been passed down was rejected. And there's a lot of love, that's communicated in food, the old classics.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard, "Oh, this wasn't made with love"? You didn't use love as an ingredient. There's love that's communicated there. So when you start changing the way that you eat, it's a lot of people get offended by that. Fortunately, what I've discovered, and I'm Cuban born and I love Cuban food. I mean, I grew up with this stuff, was that it's really two things that determine the enjoyment of a meal. It's the texture and the seasoning. And if you can nail those two things, you can recreate a lot of the prior, foods that you were eating. So that's what we have done. My wife and I, it's funny, we laugh a lot of times when we're eating something new that we just made and we're like, "Oh my goodness, this is so good. This reminds me of what your mom used to make," and so on and so forth. But it's the texture and the seasoning. So I don't necessarily need the animal products. I don't need, the dairy and all of that. It's looking at food a new way. So that makes it easier. So when you start having the new habits, your body now begins to get the nutrients that it needs. So now the cravings start going away. You don't have the same cravings that you had prior because your body is getting the nutrients. And now that your body's getting the nutrients, you have a little bit more control over the choices of your food. So now you start looking at food a little differently and you're like, "You know what? I do want to recreate such and such meal, but how about if I do that with, with more beans or more chickpeas and, like the mock tuna salads, mock tuna sandwiches that we can get, with the chickpeas and a little bit of vegan mayo and celery and apples if you want, and all of a sudden you have a tuna fish that is chickpeas.
Yeah, it's great. Well, just thinking outside the box, and even just like the thing I've learned even in the last year or so is just like what you can do with like particularly tempeh and tofu. Just like the big giant block. It's like grate it with the cheese grater.
Yes,
and then grill it. It's like it turns into like a pulled pork kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Have you ever tried jackfruit?
Yeah. My problem with jackfruit, it doesn't have the protein.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I find I still need something else with it. I get the jackfruit, but if you just grate tofu with like a block grater and then just bake it, grate it, cover it in like a rub, like a sauce rub, whatever flavors you want, and then bake it until it's like crispy, and it's pretty good.
Yeah. We're on the same page. It's funny how much misinformation is out there about soy. Tofu, and people are like, oh, it's going to give you cancer, it's going to give you estrogen, it's going to give you all this kind of stuff, and people don't stop to realize, well, this is a competing industry against the meat industry, and it's a competing industry to the dairy industry. They're losing customers. A lot of the Gen Zs, I think, are vegan, for the animals and for all of that, so they're not drinking dairy like other generations are, so they're losing market shares.
Yeah.
So what do? They use fear mongering, in order to get you to stay away from, tofu and so on and so forth. And
it's hilarious how we've seen this shift, and I see it from people who, even like my sister, who is like a hardcore carnivore and will be her entire life, but she drinks almond milk.
Yes.
So many people have gotten off the milk concept. They've kind of come around to that, but it's like they're still dairy and ice cream. Well, that's a different boat. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think it's going to take time for people.
I think so.
And that's okay too. People just need to come at their own pace. So what did your meals look like at the beginning? You start eating whole food, plant-based, and what are some of your go-tos?
Well, I love oatmeal. And we actually load up our oatmeal. I get some non-dairy yogurt. I add, actually my wife puts it together. It's loaded with berries, non-dairy yogurt. She'll put flaxseed on it that you don't even really taste it, which I don't mind the taste of it, but for the omegas and so on and so forth. It was funny because this morning my wife and I were doing our walk, and we'll do oatmeals maybe 3 times a week. We'll do some other things. We like just egg with we'll do something with that, like an omelet. Yeah, with the just egg. But anyway, so this morning I'm walking and I said, okay, what am I thinking? Right? We're married 38 years. What am I thinking? She goes, you're thinking of breakfast. I said, right. Okay. What am I thinking about breakfast? She goes, you're thinking, what are we going to have? I said, right. What do you think I want today? She goes, oatmeal. I go, yeah. So, but we don't do oatmeal every day. So it's not like, we do it like a couple times a week, but it was the oatmeal. So anyway, oatmeal. For lunch, it's greens. I buy the big, tubs of greens from the grocery store. I get 2 gigantic plates. I load those with the greens. I get the different peppers, the different colors. I put that on there. Sometimes we'll do a sweet potato. We'll air fry it, and we love air fryers. That's just incredible.
Same.
Air fry the baked potato, the sweet potato. Cut that up. And that's kind of like our lunch, and that's probably 4 days a week. We'll do that. And that's kind of how we do it. Dinner, we may do like spaghetti, with like marinara. We may do some kind of tofu dish where I I cut up and I air fry the tofu and I make it crispy and things like that. And we do that. So it's just a variation of those kinds of things. Now we still like going out to eat, but now when we go out to eat, we'll get like a veggie pizza, and we'll do it loaded with veggies. We were going to one place that they did the eggplant, but they fried the eggplant, but they would blot it for us. So they would blot it to get some of the oil out. And we would do it without the cheese, and it just be loaded with all these veggies. So we would do things like that. Or we would go to a Chinese restaurant. They already know us. They'll do the fried rice without oil, or either steam it or whatever's on the wok, and no eggs or nothing like that, and maybe do some tofu. maybe not, but she already knew, and loaded with veggies. And so we would have fried rice loaded with veggies. So I think those kinds of things make us feel like we're not really deprived, that we can still have the experience. We have these restaurants that we go to.
Yeah, and we're lucky we're at this point in time in history too, where it's like it's not that hard to find, a plant-based anyway, sometimes not always whole food plant-based, but plant-based meals, whether you're on the road or not, like enough places go. But I just found like I find, especially as a filmmaker, I'm often traveling. So if I'm with a group and they're like, hey, we all want to go here for dinner, I just take that extra moment where I look at the menu in advance, see if there is anything. And if there isn't, I usually just call them up like, hey, just so you know, I'm coming with this group. This is how I eat. Is there anything you can modify or make for me?
That's excellent.
And I just try to give them a heads up because I don't want to be that person that shows up last minute and demands like.
Yeah, exactly.
Menu, right. So I try to give them a heads up when I can. And I find most people are accommodating.
I agree. I agree. Well, one big thing, I love popcorn. I do. I put it in a bag, stick it in the microwave, and I know some people don't like microwaves, but I do popcorn. I love potatoes, regular potatoes. I eat potatoes. So it's, man, I don't know. I feel like I eat more food now than I did before. And the funny thing is my way to stabilize, I was reading your article and you were talking about how you went down all the way to, I think, 160.
Yeah.
160, and then you're still doing the fasting, and then you went back up close to like 190 or something like that.
I kind of coast between 190 and 2, and I find that's just probably where my body should be.
Well, that's what I'm finding as well. I'm kind of around that range, but my waist is like 33, and sometimes even, again, depends on the cut of the pants and everything, but sometimes 33s are like falling off me. So I can't say officially I'm 32 because I know there's some 32s that don't work, but it's all of a sudden I'm like 32, 33. I used to be size 44. I mean, I was huge.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, I went from like a triple X to a small size within like 2.5 years.
Yeah, I could wear mediums. I don't think I'm.
Now I'm more of a medium. I realized after all my smalls were starting to get tight.
Yeah. But it's just so funny because I never thought, man, that I would get there. Like, I was so frustrated at 244. Oh, okay, I'm going to start exercising. 243. I lost a pound. I did like 3 months of exercise. I lost a pound. I mean, that was like so frustrating. I drink a lot of water. I mean, I drink tons of water. I have my jar my jug that I fill 2 or 3 times a day. I drink plenty of water. I mean, I eat a lot of food. I mean, surprisingly. And
well, that's the thing we know as knowing when you eat whole food plant-based, it's not about volume because the volume, it's almost impossible to overeat.
Yes.
It's so nutrient dense, right?
Yes, exactly. And that was the lesson that I had to learn was that. And that we can do this. But like you were saying, when you eat something that your body's not used to, your body rejects it. It's really amazing how your body adapts to this way of eating and your taste buds change. And if for whatever reason, if we don't have a salad for a day or 2 days, I mean, it's like our body's saying, "Where's my salad? Where's my greens? Where's my?" Right?
Same way. Like when we go on a trip, and if we haven't eaten, we've been eating out a lot or whatever. Yes. It's just like after, like we went to family camp and they were great. They had a vegan menu and everything, but it was a lot of process and all of this.
Yes,
and even my kids were like, "I just want a bowl of fruit."
Yeah.
Like they had like sugar cereals and other things. They were like, we just want a bowl of fruit and a salad.
And the food tastes better, doesn't it? Like when you don't have all that.
When you reset your palate and you're used to not all that kind of stuff. Because I even find I'm a big cook. I love cooking. I love baking. I have a sweet tooth. But I find like if I'm taking someone else's recipe and modifying it, the first thing I usually have to do is like cut the sugar in half because it's too much.
Yes. And the oils, right? Like
it's so easy to cut out oil though in baking. It's like between, depending on, because that's the other thing too. And I have a video on that on my YouTube too, because to cut out oil, all you have to do is figure out what's the oil doing. Is it working as a binder? Is it working as an emulsifier? Is it like, what's it doing? And then you replace it with either like a fruit or a vegetable puree or aquafaba can work too. Juice. Oh my God. I saw someone posted a photo that some grocery store was selling jars of aquafaba
Oh, really?
for $15.
Wow.
I was like, buy the chickpeas.
Yeah. That's the chickpea water. Yeah.
Good for that
Have you
snake
ever
oil
seen the
salesman.
meringues that people make with those?
Yeah,
They
I
do
made
the
them too.
aquafaba, they whip it up, and they put some vanilla in it, and you have this meringue.
Yeah, because you can make whipped cream out of it, right?
Yeah.
You just
My
put it in the
wife,
oven and it just makes a meringue.
one of the most surprising things that my wife makes is she'll do fudge brownies, and she uses black beans.
Yep.
With it, and you would never know that
No.
they had black beans in it, and it's a fudge brownie.
We have competing brownie recipes in my house. My wife prefers the black brownie one, and my kids prefer this one that I do with avocado and banana.
Yeah, and you can make ice cream with avocado. You can make, just so many things.
Well, like you said, it's just seasoning and texture, and the texture is easy because you just want creamy, and then it's just like, well, how do you get the fatty flavor? Well, the fats you can get from avocados or coconut, or it's not that hard. You just have to be kind of creative.
Yes, my wife made this lemon ice cream, which is basically just lemons and water, frozen and everything like that. And she did add a little bit of brown sugar to it, and which I didn't even think it needed that. She wanted that, but it was great. It was like this limoncello kind of thing, and all it is frozen lemon. It was just great. So I'm just grateful. It's been neat to see. I have one friend of mine that is a doctor in Australia or New Zealand, and I apologize because she'll probably be watching this, that told my story to one of her patients about how you could, reverse your chronic disease. And she was practicing a certain discipline in medicine, and she made a shift to do more preventive style lifestyle medicine. And she was saying that it was because she was inspired by what she heard, in my story. So it's kind of neat because you have people, like you said, that kind of demean us a little bit with, oh, that's good for you, good for you. I could never do that, or I would never do that. And then you have other people like that are like, wow, that story really impacted me, and I'm doing this because of what I saw with you.
And I find that's more often the case. With I'm lucky, I have my website, I do this YouTube stuff, but I find like there's not a day that goes by that I don't get like someone coming up and saying, hey, I saw this thing, or I tried this recipe of yours.
Yeah.
And that just fills your bucket right up.
Yeah, man, it really does. And
it just makes you cast the people away that are just not there yet, or just don't want it. I'm just shocked by the amount of people that engage with you negatively.
Yes.
Like, do something else with your time.
Yeah. I don't get it. One thing, when we talked about the sports and everything, my high school football coach, which was interesting because he was really a hard coach, but for some reason I got him and he got me. I really liked him. And I was probably one of the only players that actually talked back to him, and he never reacted in a negative way. Okay. There was a lot of mutual respect. Well, anyway, I found out this a couple of years ago that he died. He passed away. Oh my gosh, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I started weeping like a little baby, because I had a flashback to all of a sudden I'm 15 years old, and there he is, as the coach, and he's introducing himself for the first time. And the thing that was such a characteristic of this person was his passion for life and his passion for people. He impacted so many people just with his enthusiasm of life and his enthusiasm of people, that even after he left, coaching for years, some of his players would take him out to lunch, and they were called Nelson's boys, and they just loved him. And when I heard that he died, I was crying, but not only was I crying because of the impact he made on my life, but I was thinking, I'm not a passionate person. Mm-hmm. I'm not impacting people. What will my legacy be? And this was like 8 years ago. And it's so crazy now, because of the heart disease and because of all this kind of stuff, to realize that I have a mission and I have a purpose, and that there are people now that I am in one way or another impacting. Yeah. And, one of the greatest has been, seeing the respect that I get from my daughter, because she never saw a healthy father. My son who's 4 years older than my daughter, he still saw like a little remnants of me before I faded into the abyss of being, diseased. But my daughter didn't really see that. She saw this unhealthy father. So this has been a whole new kind of experience for her. Like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? So that was really cool to see.
Well, you're going to be able to spend more time with them for longer because, the truth is you've added years to your life.
Amen. And my grandchildren, there were no grandchildren when this thing started. We have 3. Yeah. And my oldest is very maternal. She's 3.5, and she's always looking out for me. They call me Ello. Ello, don't fall down. Ello, watch out. Ello, she's taking over the role of like my mom. This little 3.5-year-old girl is always like looking out for me.
And you can run around and probably keep up with them, right?
Yes, I do. I mean, we were at a park not too long ago, and my wife is looking at, us. I'm running with them. I mean, I'm running. There was one time I was trying to do a race with my little granddaughter. She didn't want to race. So there was this other little girl there that wanted to race me. So I'm racing her. So I'm running around with this little girl running in the park. And my granddaughter's like, wait a minute, you can't take my Ello. That's my Ello. So all of a sudden she joins in. So I'm running with these 2 little girls in this park. And my wife comes to me afterwards. She says, you realize that you're like the only adult that is active in this whole park? All the other adults, regardless of their age, are just sitting, looking at their phone. They're not even engaged with their children or their grandchildren.
Well, I think people like you and I that have gone through this, I'm just saying I'm the one that goes out and will play the sports with I have a son that's 14 now, and he beats me. But it's like, I just find my brain, like with the switch now, I'm like, I just look for excuses to move. I go, movement. I'm going to go and do that because it's just like, it's gamifying. It's like,
yes.
So with all this, just to kind of to wrap it all up, you mentioned your legacy, all these kind of things. Like, what would you, if you had like a couple pieces of advice or one particular for people that are on that other end of the spectrum where we started, they're just starting off, what would you kind of want to leave them with?
I would focus on, instead of focusing on what not to do, like I said earlier on, I'm not going to have sugars. I'm going to forget that for right now. Just forget that. Focus on what you can do. Drink water. Drink a lot of water. Get your greens, right? Maybe hold off on the oils, for the dressing, but eat your greens, chew your greens, and move. You don't have to run. If you can just walk to the end of the block and back and just do that every day and make it like a fun thing, make it like a game. I think those are the important things because that really sets the foundation for other transformative change. Because once you have your body on the same page with you, because the cravings go away, now you can start making some more meaningful changes because you're not fighting your body. Your body's not saying, I need this junk food anymore. So those are the things that I would say. Drink your water, eat your greens. If you are going to eat meat, because there's a lot of people that for whatever reason, they still, like to eat meat, leave it for the weekend, eat your greens and eat clean and be as clean and focused as you can Monday through Friday. And then if you want to eat a little bit different, maybe Friday night, Saturday,
let that be the thing you earn from your sticker chart.
Absolutely. Let that be the thing that you earn on the weekend, and then just get right back, back to the greens and so on and so forth. But absolutely, man. I appreciate what you're doing, getting the message out. It's so funny that we're both in the same issue.
Yeah,
that was so neat. And yeah, man, to leave, this is our legacy in a lot of ways. You're setting an example for your children and your grandchildren of how you can change. Like you said, you knew your father a certain way and he was a heavy person, but you're changing that trajectory. There's a quote, and it's really not the way that I say it. I actually kind of paraphrased it, but it basically says, disease runs through family lines until someone is there to heal it. Your descendants and your ancestors celebrate every time you do the work. And then I always say, note to self, do the work. So disease and, all those, you didn't even have the disease. You just had the one, the obesity thing. It kind of met its match when it met you, man. It was like,
but also just it's fascinating now because we have a big family Christmas now, and like not everyone there is plant-based, but they just want me to cook. They're like, we'll just eat whatever you're gonna make.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
and it's been fun and challenging. And sometimes they have a little turkey or whatever they bring it in, but like everyone they want to try it out. And the way we look at it is like, let's have traditions that aren't based around food.
Absolutely. That's good.
Because really what it is we want to spend the time with other people.
Yes.
Right. And even when it's like with friends and whatnot, because so many people are like, well, I'm like, look, I'll go wherever. I just want to make sure I have something to eat. But it's like, I'll eat a big snack before or after. It's like, I'll sit there and have a piece of toast if that's all there is. I'm there for you. It's like I don't go to a restaurant with a friend to enjoy. I mean, sometimes we enjoy the food, but enjoy the person and not like make the meal an issue.
Yes.
Right.
I totally agree.
We're not starving. You'll make up the calories before or after. You'll be fine.
Exactly. And so, man, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to do this. I know that as you post it online, other people will come across it. I put it on my Instagram, so I told a lot of people, and I know a lot of people are working, and
that's okay. People can watch this later. So what you can do if you watch this after the fact and you want to ask any questions, throw them in the chat, and we can always come back and comment on the YouTube
absolutely itself. Yes. And can I mention my Instagram?
Oh yeah. Do your shout outs.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram, allheart1959. It's private. You just need to request it, but you're more than welcome to request. And I post a lot of photos, and you're going to see pictures of me.
I'll put that in the description below as well. So I think you emailed that to me, so I'll put that in the description below.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it was great working together with you, and
you too. This was so much fun.
Success. Yeah, man, it was great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you have a lovely day, and for those watching, I'm going to be doing more of these with people that have been in the Forced Overnight Success series over the last couple of years. So there's going to be more of these coming throughout the year.
Maybe reach out to Dr. Ostfeld. He was in there as Dr. Kale.
Oh, I'd love to start talking to those people. Yeah, those are my heroes.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, God bless you, Jeremy. Thank you for having me. Okay.